Hello Raiders, this is Ezron. Welcome to my Bastion. It is Friday the 8th of October 2021 and patch 4.70 has been out for a couple of days now. I wanted to take this opportunity to talk a little bit more about Urogrim and his nerf. Obviously he is not as good as he was before. I think the question to be answered, however, is he still worth using, and can he be a benefit to your account? And of course, the bottom line here is that it depends on your account, and for mine specifically, I think he still has a lot of value. So I'm going to tell you how I made the evaluation and then talk about where you might find it to be useful as well. Before we get into the teams I've built and where I use Eurogrim, I'm going to take a second to go look at mine just so you have an idea of how he is built and the level of gear that I've got him in. Give me a second to pull him up. And here we are. I have him built with relatively high hit points but low defense and good speed, reasonably high accuracy, and pretty good resists. Now, I do not use him as a solo farmer. I think that that's part of what the nerf was about, to keep you from doing that. And I will say that's why I made the choices around high hit points but low defense. I don't really expect Urogrim to be targeted because of his high hit point pool. So he really only has to deal with AoEs and making sure he doesn't die to things like that. I don't expect him to take that many direct hits. Masteries wise, I have done what I would consider to be a pretty standard PvE build. We went through War Master to get a little bit of damage, and then I tried to get Master Hexer to extend the duration of poisons that he might place, as well as lasting gifts. The idea being that he'll extend the duration of the continuous heals. You could have gone potentially with a slightly other support mastery, and I think that that's especially valuable if you can't meet otherwise accuracy requirements. I don't see a whole lot of value in putting him in the defense tree, although I think the argument of getting him either deterrence for when people counterattack and building him with not so high of a hit point pool, or retribution, again, just to get more attacks with A1 and more poisons out there, I think is a reasonable build if you have really good accuracy and make him pretty tanky. That's just not the way that I went. So let's talk about now where I use Eurogrim and where he might still be helpful for you. So the first place that I use Eurogrim and he works for me is in Dragon's Lair, specifically stage 24, which is where I farm just from an energy efficiency perspective to get gear. Let's go look at my team there, and then I'll talk about how I subbed in Eurogrim. Here's the team that I had been using to my dragon farming. Just to give you an idea of how it works, Tyrell does AoE defense down and has decreased attack on his A1. That becomes important when you get to the dragon. Mashald keeps True Fear up on everyone as a crowd control step, as well as has Leech available for extra healing. I use Sile for healing and a res in case anyone dies. She is also in a stun set for some extra crowd control of the waves. Then you have Kael, who is here to do AoE damage on the waves and place poison on the dragons. And Steel Skull, who I actually like a whole lot, that does a combination of cleansing should it be required, AoE heals, defense up, making Tyrell hit harder and everyone else more survivable, and then has dual poisons on the A1, which is really good for dragon use. And so what I did was substitute Urogrim for Steel Skull. Now, he has the same dual poison on the A1 as Steel Skull, but has a slightly higher chance of placing it, as well as trades the AoE heal with defense up that Steel Skull has for the AoE double poison with continuous heals. So the idea is we get a little bit more poison damage output from him and don't really lose much in the way of survivability. We just achieve it in a different way, primarily through extra heals rather than the defense up. Now, at this point, I'm not going to do a whole bunch of dragon runs because I think you all have probably seen dragon runs enough times it's not interesting, but I will show some interesting data I collected specifically about this change and how it affected my overall dragon times. Here's my team with some data I gathered running it during the most recent dragon tournament. This team is reliable. I normally farm overnight, so time isn't that important, but faster is always better. So this is a between 5 and 6 minute run and is fairly consistent. I'll note that occasionally Mashald or Kael will die in the second wave, especially if neither of the Lurias get crowd controlled by either fear or stun, and they both get off crits. You know, that can kill either one of these two, and they have block revive on their A2. So there's a little bit of risk there, and that's, I think, what contributes to the slower runs. But essentially, as long as the other three players get to the dragon, the team is survivable enough, and Steel Skull puts out enough poison that the dragon goes down without too much of a hassle. Now, I did the Urogrim substitution, and I found two interesting things. Number one is, I start out with Urogrim as my team lead because I assume that having the 20% speed lead would be better overall than having Tyrell's 25% defense aura. And I found that when I did that, I got, 515 to 530 essentially. I got a relatively consistent 5.5 minute run, at which point I was kind of not super impressed with Urogrim. It seemed like, a whole lot of resources to use to gain 20 or 30 seconds. Then I got to thinking and put Tyrell back as my lead and did, more runs. And neither of these, I'll admit the statisticians among us will probably know this isn't enough data to draw, conclusions good enough to spend money on, but for, my level of involvement and preference in a video game, it's fine. And so with Urogrim in the team, but not as the lead, I got a relatively wide range of times. Some as fast as 4:46, some as slow as almost 6 minutes. So for me and doing Dragon, this is really the optimal team setup I have. Now, you would probably find a team like this helpful or maybe better than the times that you can execute if you don't have Seer, who I don't have, and you don't have an AoE poison exploder like Zavia. And so I think in this case, Urogrim can be a pretty significant upgrade and enhancement depending on what champions you have and the amount of gear you have. And so overall, at this point, I'm happy I built Urogrim. You have to do dragon runs a fair amount anyway. Part of it is to get speed gear. The other part is that there's always a dragon tournament in fusions. So I feel like if this were the only thing that I did with Urogrim, I would consider it to be a win. However, there's one other place I also use Urogrim that I think, the impact is even bigger. And we'll get to that one in a second. The next place that I use Urogrim, and I think is even probably more impactful than Dragon, is Ice Golem. Again, here I farm stage 24. Part of it is affinity purposes, and part of it is energy efficiency. But here's the team I use for that. Again, Tayra for the defense aura. I think, survivability is super important in Ice Golem because especially the boss hits really hard if it gets the Frozen Vengeance going. So we have to make sure that we stay alive there. A similar idea that Mashald and Sile of the Drakes perform a combination of healing and crowd control. Urogrim is in for poisons, and here's where he's very impactful, is his AoE poisons in the stage with the boss end up on the boss. And poison damage does not set off the Frozen Vengeance skill, so if you can get a significant amount of damage from the AoE poisons, you don't have to worry as much about the revives or the super hard hit from the boss. And then I use Conqueror, as relatively ineffective as he is, because I don't have other good block revive champs. The idea with him really is you get him to the boss stage and you hope that his A2 kills one or two of the minions. That makes dealing with the boss much easier because he hits so much less hard. If Frozen Vengeance skill happens when one or both of the minions are alive. Like I said, he's super difficult to keep alive. He often dies one or two times along the way to the waves, and Sile reses him when we're against the boss. But if you can get him to proc that skill, it does really well. And here's where I was super impressed with the difference that Eurogrim made. So here's a run I did, for example. You'll note 5.5 minutes, which again isn't a super fast time because I don't have champs to get me through the wave super fast or a very reliable block reviver on my team. But my stage 24 time before this was like 12 minutes, just because the boss would revive the minions so much and I had to spend much more time killing them. I think Urogrim was super helpful in doing poison damage to the boss in order to keep him from bringing the minions back to life, and that essentially half my time. So I think in either of these cases, Urogrim is still probably a good champion to build if your account is in a state like mine. If you have a Seer or a Zavia, not as much. You probably won't find as many places to use him. But not everyone has those champions, and I will say for me, I'm still very happy I built Urogrim even after the nerf. I'm also of the opinion that the nerf was a little bit heavy-handed, and I'd like to see him put the A1 back to being a triple hit rather than a double hit. I say this for two reasons. Number one is, it would be a little bit more poison damage output, but I think then having the triple hit on the A1 would make him more viable for Fire Knight. And there's probably some comps with having the extra triple hit on the A1 and poisons to clear waves and the heal, where he would be very useful in that situation. So I think my bottom line here is, for my account, even after the nerf, Eurogrim is still good and useful. Or you just toss Urogrim in your vault because he was nerfed. Instead, do a few runs with him. I mean, yes, it's energy, and you might not get optimal use if you have other teams. But finding out things like, does he make your times faster, and whether or not taking advantage of his speed aura helps your team, I think they're all things that you're going to have to figure out for yourself and for your account. And you might find out, like I did in my case, that he still is an improvement over other champions that you have. So, yes, I think the Plarium nerfed a little bit hard, but I think the bottom line here is he's still a good champion. I'm still going to use him. Hopefully you all can make that choice for yourself and not just throw up your hands in frustration. Because I get it's frustrating that you used resources with the idea you got a certain outcome and now you're getting a different outcome. But my message here is it might not be as bad as you think. So take that as food for thought. Hopefully it helps you build and improve your account. Please like and subscribe if this video and my approach helps you, and hopefully you all have a good day. This is Ezron signing off.